everyone, and thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Robin Wouters. I'm a technology journalist specialized in European innovation ecosystems. As the founder of TechEU, I'm delighted to work with a number of partners on something we call EIC Scaling Club, which is a new initiative that aims to play a super active role in connecting Europe's leading deep tech scale-ups, investors, and other stakeholders in order to grow the ecosystem to the benefit of everyone. With that context in mind, I'm delighted to be joined here today for this podcast by Ana Maiques. She is a Spanish entrepreneur and co-founder and longtime CEO of a company called Neuroelectrics, which is a company that aims to change the way we interact with the brain, developing innovative technologies to monitor and stimulate the brain and thus help patients in need. A very warm welcome to you, Ana. How have you been?
Thank you, Robin. I'm a huge fan of TechEU and also of the EIC, so it's really a pleasure to be here with you today. Thank you.
Fantastic. That's good to hear. Now, Neuroelectrics, you've been at that company for quite a while, but can you explain to those who don't know, in a nutshell, what does the company do?
So for many, like you and others that know me from just traveling around the globe, I always wear my famous cap with electrodes, right? So what Neuroelectrics is trying to do is really using a novel therapeutic mode, non-invasive brain stimulation, so really inject brain to really the brains of patients that are suffering. So our idea is that drugs are wonderful, but sometimes they are limited. So we believe there is a new approach to deal with the brain. The brain is an electric system. So our goal is really to develop these new therapies based on our platform and our device that can stimulate the brain with electricity, but also monitor the brain, which again is an electric part of your body.
Wow. That sounds like a company that's very heavily rooted in science. Is that also where the origins of the background of the company comes from?
Yes, and because you have here the logo of the European Union, we started more than 20 years ago with our first company doing neuroscience research. And I think that probably the brain is yet the most sophisticated, the most unknown part of our body. There are almost 100 billion neurons in our brain, and we don't know how it works. And Ramon y Cajal, who was a Spanish scientist and one of our few Nobel Prizes, started really to describe how the brain works, but we are still so far away from really understanding the complexity of this part of our body, which really makes us human. So it's a really deep science, deep tech company, because what the problem we are trying to address is extremely difficult to address. And we couldn't be here without the support of so many European research funding programs like Horizon 2020. We have a European Research Council grant. We are one of the few private companies that has a strong ERC. So, there's no way we can understand the brain without a lot of research and deep tech funding.
Yeah. You mentioned you use the roots of the neuroscientific research to essentially help people with brain diseases. Can you be a bit more specific about what kind of treatments they can get and what kind of diseases you're trying to, fix?
So after years and years of research in neuroscience and developing our famous CAP, we decided to really, we don't want to be only scientists writing papers and making wonderful publications. We really want to have an impact and take it to the patient. And that takes such a huge effort. One of the main barriers is when you want to take a therapy or a new concept to a patient, you need to go through the regulatory burden. So we decided to scale up our company from Barcelona to Boston. Almost 8 years ago, we moved to Boston for 7 years. And there we started our first FDA trial 2 years ago. So we decided to do epilepsy. Epilepsy is a disorder that creates seizures, and it's because your brain is hyperexcited. Let's say it has too much activity in a part of your brain. So what we do is we inject with our cap electrical stimulation, which is inhibitory. So we try to bring the excitation down through electrical currents, and we do this 20 minutes during 10 days, day after day after day, non-invasively. And we have shown to the FDA that we can reduce seizures by 50%. So our patients, after 10 days of stimulation, they reduce seizures by half. So today, we are doing a pivotal phase 3 study for the FDA in Europe and in the US with 190 patients that are receiving this non-invasive stimulation therapy. And if we succeed, and the results are as good as in the pilot, we will become the first company in the world to go through the FDA with this novel therapy. So the vision is that patients will be prescribed our CAP at home, and you will be receiving stimulation at home. And I think this is the dream of an entrepreneur. You start by an idea, you start doing heavy research, you start doing a lot of projects, and finally you're at the footsteps with the FDA to become a new therapy that will have an impact on millions of patients. But after epilepsy, now we are doing also another FDA trial in depression. Within mental health is one of our biggest challenges after the pandemic. So we've also seen phenomenal results in depression, and we also want to take our therapy to these patients and also go through the regulatory path.
Wow. That's very impressive. You're tackling really big problems and very complex problems for that matter. But it also means that it takes quite a long time to develop these things. It's quite capital intensive as well. You mentioned you received some grants and funding. But do you think you'll get to a point where you can essentially commercialize the products or the service to a point where it's self-sustainable?
Well, yes. So we did raise significant amount of capital in our Series A funding. We raised almost 20 million of Series A. We are going to be heading soon for a Series B, and I think that the deployment of this intensive capital is really to go not only through the regulatory but through the reimbursement strategy. And I think we are going to be commercial in less than 3 years. And it is really, we are going to be restless until we get this technology into the houses of millions of patients. And I think that's the drive that sometimes I lack in some very deep tech or European scientists, because, you know, the scientific part is very challenging, but so is the business part, right? And it just takes perseverance and time and effort to go to all these obstacles. And there's no shortcut. You're working with brain patients, so you have to follow the rules. You have to make sure it's safe, and you have to make sure that you're protecting the patient. But we'll do whatever it takes to get to the commercial stage. And I think that's the commitment we have to our team and to our investors.
Great. Well, looking forward to seeing that part of the journey as well. You already mentioned you commute between Boston and Barcelona quite a lot. Was it critical for you as a company to set up base in the US as well, or could you have built this company solely in Europe?
Well, I think it's a great question, and what I believe is when you're an entrepreneur, we always had like a global mind. So it doesn't matter that you're born in Europe or in the US. The thing is, what is your mindset? I mean, do you want to help patients only in Europe, only in Spain, only in the US? So our motivation is, if there are patients suffering from epilepsy in Europe, in the US, and in Asia, why do we need to serve only, one population, right? So I think our mindset is global. And I think Europe is wonderful. We have great people, great talent, great companies. But I think that scaling up your company to a territory like the US or Asia is also critical, because the world is big. Europe is a part of it, and you have to leverage the benefits of every territory. Boston is a wonderful place. It's a place where a lot of innovation happens. It's a place where risk is accepted, where failure is accepted. And Europe is a place where you can develop technology in a brilliant, amazing way, right? So I think, and then Asia, I think it gives you a scale that you don't find anywhere else, right? So you have to play your cards in an intelligent way in every territory. So I don't consider myself only European, only Bostonian. We have a lot of activity in Asia. I would like to see of Neuroelectrics, as a global company.
Great. Well, it's great to hear the global ambitions as well. And part of what we do at the EIC Scaling Club is exactly the same, trying to help scale up the Series A, Series B, Series C stage companies to a point where they can become global leaders. Now, you're quite familiar with the EIC yourself. Can you elaborate a little bit on how you worked with the EIC in the past?
So the EIC, I think, was a great idea. And I've been serving the EIC board for 4 years. I think I'm one of the longest members in the EIC board. I was in the initial pilot phase, and this one, because my mandate couldn't be more than 4 years. So from this point, I'm not longer a member. But I think that I have a lot of visibility on the EIC. I think the European Commission has recognized that our companies need funding to compete at a global level, and that we are at disadvantage with the US and other territories, right? So I think that the fact that the Commission is directly investing in companies is a really amazing strategy, and it has brought a lot of friction internally at the Commission, right? Because they're acting as a public venture capital funder, right? But I think I've seen the EIC so much demand every time we put out a call. There's so many companies that are left without funding, and I've seen some of our companies becoming unicorns and centaurs. And if you think of the strategies of countries like France and position themselves in the scale-up game, or even Spain or others, I think we have a tremendous opportunity, and I think the public money and the EIC are critical to help companies, especially, for example, women-led organizations. That's one of the reasons why I joined the EIC. Eastern countries, I mean, in the board, we have people from Estonia, Bulgaria, Czech Republic. The widening countries are awesome. I mean, young people, highly technical, highly entrepreneurial, right? So I think that, Europe is a new Europe, and we need to make sure that there are not hidden heroes, right? And we give these brilliant people the chance they deserve to scale up their companies. And that happens in America with the famous American dream, that we could debate whether that's still a case. But I think in Europe, we also have to provide those opportunities and the funding. And the Commission is an entity that can do things that the private market cannot.
Yeah, maybe we should be calling it the European dream.
Exactly.
Uh, Now, the EIC has been strongly focused on science-driven innovation, sort of the breakthrough technologies, the more capital-intensive, patient, longer to develop type of technologies. When you started Neuroelectrics, the term deep tech wasn't really a term yet, I believe. Do you consider yourself a deep tech company or a medical tech company? How do you describe yourself typically?
Well, I think we are kind of like a medical device company, but I think that we are rooted in very deep. For example, as an example, I mean, you've seen my device, and we are a medical device company in the sense that we have to bring these devices to the market through regulatory process and so on. But for example, my co-founder, Giulio Ruffini, who is a scientist, is developing what we call neurotwins, or digital copies of the brain on the cloud. These sophisticated computational neuroscience models of the brain, they make a replica of your brain in the cloud. They take your biophysics. So how is your brain physically from an MRI, your scalp thickness, your conductivity. They also take how your brain behaves electrophysiologically, how your brain waves are generated, and they made this computational replica of Robin's brain. So this neurotwin then is used to really personalize or anticipate, predict how your brain will respond to different treatments before you provide those treatments. We use it for our electrical stimulation, but this is huge to me, huge deep tech computational power, because so I still see, because we have 25 people in the company only doing brain models, physicists, mathematicians, engineers, and they're building these very, very difficult replicas of the brain. So I still consider myself more of a deep tech company than a medical device, because what we are developing at the company is so cutting edge, and it's so visionary, and it hasn't been done before, that I think we will forever be a deep tech company.
Yeah. And are you yourself personally on board with this whole notion of we need to support the deep tech entrepreneurs in particular in Europe, because that's where the talent is, that's where the um, sort of the strength of Europe lies? Do you agree with that?
Well, I think yes, partly. In the EIC, we used to say solving relevant problems in a responsible way. If you analyze that sentence, solving relevant problems, is that's where the deep tech comes. Like if you think about climate change, if you think about neurodegeneration, Alzheimer's, the brain, the aging, these huge challenges that humanity has, you're not going to solve with a software to date or to buy food. You know what I'm saying? So you really need deep tech for some of these huge challenges. So solving relevant problems is where I think Europe has a tremendous opportunity. Do you know that in Europe we create more science and publications than in any other territory? So we are the number one creator of knowledge, but we are terrible in turning knowledge into money. I think that's the part where the US is amazing, right? It's like you turn money into knowledge, but then that knowledge should get back to money, right? Um, so I think that that's also where the responsible way comes, and the European way is more like the ethical way of what kind of companies are we supporting, what kind of companies are we scaling, and honestly, with all my respects, I don't think we need 1,000 buy food delivery companies. We also need, to really go to science to solve transportation, pollution, climate change, energy, health. So I do agree with the sense that we need deep tech, but we also need the ethics in growing these companies.
Yeah. I think you described it very well. I've never heard it like that before, but it's true. A lot of the systems that we have can bring money to scientists and researchers. They're very good at turning that knowledge into working prototypes, working products, but very often the next step, turning into a commercial product and scaling up a company and a global business, is the hard part. Do you think we can solve that? And is it only going to have to come from institutions like the Commission and the EIC?
I don't know. It's a really good question, and it has. You're from the UK, where you're. I mean,
I'm actually from Belgium.
sorry, but so
No
yeah,
worries.
sorry. So I think that in the UK there is still more of a mentality of business, more close to the US. I mean, I'm still shocked by my colleagues from MIT and in Boston. I mean, these scientists, they have such a business mind in a way. I mean, business and science in Boston are so close together. If you think of Bob Langer, right, which is the biggest inventor in MIT with the most number of patents, right? He's involved in so many companies, from Moderna to Biogen to this chasm between science and business in the US is not as huge, I think, as in Europe, right? So I think that it's not only about money and investment from the commission, it's about the mentality, the culture. Um, so I think that's a huge challenge for Europe. And I would love maybe to bring into the European territory some of these amazing American people with experience from those ecosystems to help us speed up, because I think we'll get there, but we are years behind and the culture is not exactly the same. So I think it still has Europe a challenge in becoming more business oriented, right? And my co-founder, he's a scientist. He went to the dark side, right? Instead of remaining in an institution, he joined a private company. But he's doing amazing research. So this concept that you're going to the dark side and that you can only do science in an institution, I think we have to break that.
Yeah, hopefully we can. Of course, the mindset and the culture change takes a lot of time, sometimes a generation, but that's definitely where the focus should lie. We're going to wrap it up, but before we do, I wanted to ask you, aside from completing the trials and getting the FDA approval and commercializing the product, what do you think the next 3 to 5 years for Neuroelectrics will look like?
Well, I think we have huge challenges. I think that it's really making sure that we push what we have into the market and into the patients, going through the regulatory and reimbursement and fundraising the company to get there. But at the same time, we need to advance the science of understanding how the brain works and making our therapies more effective. We are also working on, thanks to the Commission, in Alzheimer's and neurodegeneration. So we have a lot of challenges to see how these new technologies can improve their efficacy, their personalization. If you think of Alzheimer's or depression, the levels of the disease are so huge. There is so much heterogeneity in the kind of patients. So how you stratify them, what do you give them best? So I think that we have a lot of challenges also in the science side to understand better what every single brain needs, and every brain is different, right? So I think we'll have to work on the science, and we'll have to work on pushing what we have into the market as well.
Great conversation, and it's been amazing watching your journey unfold. I'm going to keep watching it, of course. Thank you so much for taking the time, Anna, and wishing you all the best with Neuroelectrics.
Thank you, Robin, and it's been a pleasure. Keep up the good work, and to all the entrepreneurs out there, scale up and be ambitious on the ethical, nice side. Have a great impact.
Great note to end on. Thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you. Bye-bye.